The custodial closet door slammed shut with unnecessary force. Principal Martinez had just delivered the news that would change everything for Harold Peterson, the 68-year-old janitor who had quietly served Lincoln Elementary for the past 5 years. "Budget cuts, Harold, I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. Your last day is Friday." Harold's weathered hands gripped his mop handle tighter. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he processed the words that felt like a punch to his already aching chest. "I understand," he replied simply, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Welcome to Grateful Stories, where we uncover the extraordinary moments of human kindness that remind us why gratitude and respect matter more than we often realize." Today's story will show you how one man's quiet dignity in the face of injustice sparked a chain reaction that changed an entire community. Let's uncover what really happened when a decorated war veteran was discarded like yesterday's trash, only to discover that sometimes the most powerful victories come from the most unexpected places. Harold Peterson wasn't just any janitor. 47 years earlier, he had been Sergeant Harold Peterson of the United States Marine Corps, crawling through the jungles of Vietnam with his unit, carrying wounded soldiers to safety under enemy fire. The Purple Heart and Bronze Star medals hidden in his apartment drawer told stories of courage that no one at Lincoln Elementary knew about. After returning from the war, Harold had struggled with what doctors now call PTSD, though back then it was just called being difficult to employ. He bounced between jobs for decades, fighting demons that followed him home from Southeast Asia. When his wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago, the school custodial position had been a lifeline, a chance to find purpose in serving his community's children. Every morning at 5:30, Harold arrived at Lincoln Elementary. He unlocked the doors, turned on the lights, and began his routine. Classrooms were cleaned with military precision, hallways were mopped until they gleamed. Bathrooms were spotless. He took pride in creating a clean, safe environment where children could learn. The teachers knew him as the quiet man who always smiled and never complained, even when kids tracked mud through his freshly cleaned floors. They didn't know he often stayed late, unpaid, to fix broken desks or patch holes in walls because he couldn't bear to see the school looking shabby. Harold's bucket had seen better days. The blue plastic was faded and cracked, held together with duct tape in several places. 5 years ago, when he started working at Lincoln Elementary, he had written his name in black marker on the side, H. Peterson. Over time, the letters had faded, but they were still visible to anyone who looked closely. That bucket had been with him through countless early mornings and late nights. It had held the soapy water that cleaned thousands of square feet of school floors. It had been his constant companion as he worked to make Lincoln Elementary a place where children could focus on learning instead of worrying about their environment. Now, 3 days after receiving his termination notice, Harold pushed that same bucket down the empty hallway one last time. It was Thursday evening, and tomorrow would be his final day. The school was quiet, except for the occasional sound of his mop swishing across the linoleum floor. Principal Martinez had mentioned the budget cuts, but Harold knew the real reason. The school district wanted to hire a cleaning service that would send different workers each day. It would be cheaper, they said. No benefits, no sick days, no continuity. Just bodies to push mops and empty trash cans. Harold understood economics, but it still stung. 5 years of dedicated service, of treating this school like it was his own home, reduced to a line item that needed to be eliminated. He had survived Vietnam, buried his wife, and now faced unemployment at an age when most men were settled into retirement. As he mopped the main hallway, Harold reflected on the children he had watched grow over the years. Little Maria Rodriguez, who always said good morning in her cheerful voice. Tommy Chen, who once helped him pick up scattered papers when the wind caught them. Sarah Williams, who drew him a thank you card last Christmas because she noticed how he always made sure the playground was safe. These children had never known his story. never known that the man who cleaned their school was a decorated war hero who had once carried wounded Marines to safety under enemy fire. To them, he was just Mr. Harold, the kind janitor who always smiled and made their school shine. Harold finished mopping the hallway and wheeled his bucket toward the custodial closet. His shift was over, but as had become his habit, he would stay another hour to do the detail work that wasn't officially required. Tomorrow was his last day, and he wanted to leave Lincoln Elementary in perfect condition. The next morning arrived with the cruel indifference that Fridays always brought to difficult situations. Harold Peterson reported to work at his usual 5:30, but this time he carried a small cardboard box containing the few personal items from his custodial closet: a coffee mug Sarah had given him, a small photo of his late wife, a pocket knife that had been his father's. Principal Martinez had left an envelope on Harold's workstation containing his final paycheck and the standard termination paperwork. No personal note, no acknowledgement of 5 years of faithful service, just the cold efficiency of bureaucratic necessity. Harold began his final shift with the same attention to detail he had shown every day for 5 years. He cleaned each classroom methodically, emptied every trash can, and mopped every floor. The children would arrive in 3 hours to a spotless school, just as they had every day during his tenure. In the teacher's lounge, Harold encountered Mrs. Davidson, the third-grade teacher who always arrived early to prepare her lessons. She looked up from her coffee and smiled. "Good morning, Harold. Ready for the weekend?" Harold hesitated. Mrs. Davidson didn't know today was his last day. Principal Martinez had decided not to announce Harold's departure until after he was gone, to avoid any awkward conversations or potential protests from staff who had grown fond of the quiet janitor. "Yes, ma'am. Have a good day, Mrs. Davidson." "You too, Harold. The floors look beautiful, as always." As Mrs. Davidson returned to her lesson planning, Harold felt a tightness in his chest. In 3 hours, he would walk out of Lincoln Elementary for the last time, and most of the people he had served faithfully for 5 years would never know what happened to him. The morning progressed with Harold's usual efficiency. He finished the main building and moved on to the administrative wing, where Principal Martinez's office was located. As he mopped the hallway outside the principal's office, Harold could hear Martinez on the phone discussing the transition to the new cleaning service. "The new company starts Monday. It'll save us $12,000 a year, plus we eliminate the benefits package. Yes, I know the old janitor was reliable, but we have to make cuts somewhere." Harold paused his mopping. $12,000. His annual salary and benefits package reduced to a budget line that needed to be eliminated. He thought about the teachers who would arrive Monday morning to find their classrooms cleaned by strangers who wouldn't care if the pencil sharpener was broken or if someone had stuffed paper towels in the sink. At 9:15, Harold finished his final custodial rounds at Lincoln Elementary. He returned his supplies to the custodial closet, hung up his keys, and placed his uniform shirt on the shelf. Wearing his own clothes now, he looked around the small space that had been his workplace for 5 years. The bucket sat in the corner, H. Peterson still visible in faded black marker. Harold had debated whether to take it with him, but decided to leave it for whoever came next. Maybe they would use it, maybe they would throw it away. Either way, it would no longer be his concern. Principal Martinez was in a meeting when Harold knocked on his office door. Through the glass, Harold could see Martinez gesturing animatedly to someone on a video call. Harold waited for a moment, then slipped his final timesheet under the door and walked away. As Harold pushed through the main entrance doors of Lincoln Elementary for the last time, he encountered the morning rush of arriving students. Children laughed and chattered as they streamed past him, backpacks bouncing, voices echoing in the crisp morning air. "Bye, Mr. Harold," called out Maria Rodriguez, not knowing she would never see him again. "Have a good day," Harold replied, his voice catching slightly. Harold walked to his 15-year-old pickup truck in the staff parking lot. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, looking back at the school building where he had found purpose and dignity in honest work. The American flag fluttered in the morning breeze above the main entrance, and Harold instinctively straightened his shoulders in a gesture of respect that had become automatic after decades of military training. He started the engine and drove away, leaving behind 5 years of dedicated service and stepping into an uncertain future at an age when most men his age were enjoying the security of retirement. Harold Peterson, decorated war veteran, faithful employee, and decent human being, had been discarded like an old mop bucket. But sometimes the most important part of a story happens after the protagonist thinks it's over. Principal Martinez finished his video conference at 10:30 and decided to walk through the school to check on the transition preparations. The new cleaning service would start Monday, and he wanted to ensure everything was ready for the changeover. As Martinez walked through the hallways, he noticed something he had taken for granted for 5 years. The floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, every classroom was immaculate, even the corners where dust typically accumulated were spotless. Harold Peterson's work had been invisible in its excellence, noticed only now in the moment before it disappeared forever. Martinez made his way to the custodial closet to inventory the supplies for the incoming cleaning service. He opened the door and flipped on the light, revealing the organized space that Harold had maintained with military precision. Supplies were arranged in neat rows, equipment was clean and properly stored, everything was labeled and accounted for. In the corner sat Harold's old bucket, the one he had used every day for 5 years. Martinez picked it up to move it aside, and that's when he saw the faded writing on the side, H. Peterson. Below the name, in smaller letters that Martinez had to squint to read, were the words USMC 1969-1973. Principal Martinez stared at the bucket. United States Marine Corps. Harold Peterson was a veteran. The quiet janitor who had cleaned Lincoln Elementary with such dedication and pride was a former Marine who had served his country during the Vietnam War era. Martinez set the bucket down carefully and pulled out his phone. A quick internet search for Harold Peterson Marine Vietnam yielded results that made his hands tremble. There it was, in a digitized newspaper archive from 1971. Local Marine awarded Bronze Star for heroism in Vietnam. The article described how Sergeant Harold Peterson had repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire to rescue wounded Marines during a fierce battle in Quang Nam Province. The accompanying photograph showed a young Harold in dress blues, standing at attention as a general pinned the Bronze Star on his chest. Martinez continued reading. Harold had also received the Purple Heart after being wounded by shrapnel while carrying an injured soldier to safety. The article mentioned his multiple acts of heroism and his unit's respect for his courage under fire. Principal Martinez sank into the custodial closet's single chair, Harold's bucket at his feet, the weight of his mistake crushing down on him. He had just fired a decorated war hero. A man who had risked his life to save others in Vietnam had been dismissed from his job cleaning the floors of an elementary school because of budget concerns. The irony was overwhelming. Harold Peterson had once carried wounded Marines to safety under enemy fire, and Martinez had just carried him out of Lincoln Elementary under the fire of budget cuts. The man who had served his country with honor and courage had been serving Lincoln Elementary with the same dedication, and Martinez had been too blind to see it. Martinez thought about Harold's quiet dignity during their brief termination meeting. No complaints, no arguments, no pleas for reconsideration. Just "I understand," spoken with the same calm acceptance that had probably carried him through decades of military service and personal hardship. Harold Peterson had faced his dismissal with the same grace he had probably shown in Vietnam when facing much more serious threats. The principal realized he had never really seen Harold Peterson. He had seen a janitor, an employee, a budget line item. He hadn't seen the man who arrived early every day, stayed late without complaint, and treated Lincoln Elementary like it was his sacred duty to keep it perfect for the children who learned there. Martinez picked up Harold's bucket again and noticed something else. Inside, tucked against the side, was a small piece of paper. He pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn thank you card from Sarah Williams, one of the second-grade students. The drawing showed a stick-figure man with a mop standing next to a school building, with the words, "Thank you, Mr. Harold, for making our school nice," written in a child's careful handwriting. Harold had kept this card in his work bucket, carrying it with him every day as he cleaned the school. This simple gesture from a 7-year-old had meant enough to a decorated war veteran that he treasured it like a medal. Principal Martinez stood up abruptly. This was wrong, and it needed to be fixed immediately. Harold Peterson deserved better than to be discarded because of budget concerns. The school district could find the money somewhere else, cut some other expense, or find additional funding. What they couldn't replace was a man of Harold's character and dedication. Martinez hurried to his office and began making phone calls. First, he called the district superintendent's office, demanding an immediate meeting. Then he called the school board president. Finally, he called the local newspaper, because if administrative channels failed, public pressure might succeed where bureaucracy had failed. The conversation with Superintendent Reynolds was heated. Martinez explained what he had discovered about Harold Peterson's military service and demanded that the termination be reversed immediately. "We can't just change our minds about budget cuts because someone used to be in the military," Reynolds argued. "We have fiscal responsibilities." "We have moral responsibilities too," Martinez shot back. "This man served his country with honor, and we're treating him like garbage. I'll find the money somewhere else in the budget, but Harold Peterson is not losing his job." The argument continued for 20 minutes, but Martinez was relentless. He threatened to resign, to go to the media, to make the district's treatment of a war veteran a public relations nightmare. Finally, Reynolds agreed to reconsider the decision. Meanwhile, Harold Peterson was at home in his small apartment, trying to figure out what to do next. At 68, finding new employment would be challenging. His military pension and Social Security provided basic survival, but not much more. He had been counting on working at Lincoln Elementary for a few more years to build up his savings. Harold was sitting at his kitchen table, circling job listings in the newspaper, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Lincoln Elementary's number. "Mr. Peterson, this is Principal Martinez. Could you come in to see me this afternoon? There's something important we need to discuss." Harold's heart sank. Probably some paperwork he had forgotten to complete, or perhaps Martinez wanted to discuss the transition to the new cleaning service. Harold agreed to come in at 2 o'clock. When Harold arrived at Lincoln Elementary that afternoon, he was surprised to find Principal Martinez waiting for him in the main hallway, holding Harold's old bucket. Behind Martinez stood Superintendent Reynolds, whom Harold recognized but had never met personally. "Mr. Peterson," Martinez began, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you the most sincere apology of my life. I made a terrible mistake, and I want to fix it if you'll let me." Harold stood quietly, unsure what was happening. Martinez continued, "I found out about your military service, about your Bronze Star and Purple Heart, about the men you saved in Vietnam. I also realized that for 5 years you've been serving this school with the same honor and dedication you showed in the Marines. I was wrong to let you go, and I want to offer you your job back, with a raise and a formal apology from the entire school district." Superintendent Reynolds stepped forward. "Mr. Peterson, the school board voted unanimously this afternoon to restore your position and increase your salary. We also want to establish the Harold Peterson Service Award, to be given annually to the employee who best exemplifies dedication and quiet excellence. We're deeply sorry for how you were treated." Harold looked at the 2 administrators, then at his old bucket in Martinez's hands. For a moment, The decorated war veteran, who had faced enemy fire without flinching, seemed overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. "I don't need any awards," Harold said quietly. "I just want to do my job." "Your job is here for as long as you want it," Martinez replied, handing Harold the bucket, "and everyone will know what kind of man you really are." The news of Harold Peterson's story spread quickly through Lincoln Elementary and beyond. Teachers who had worked with him for years were amazed to learn of his military heroism. Students who had known him only as the kind janitor were awed to discover that Mr. Harold was a real war hero. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the decorated veteran who had been quietly serving the community's children for 5 years. The article sparked an outpouring of support from veterans organizations, parents, and community members who were outraged that such a man had been treated so callously. But the most meaningful response came from the children of Lincoln Elementary. Led by Sarah Williams, the second grader who had drawn Harold the thank you card, the students organized a surprise assembly to honor their beloved janitor. On the morning of the assembly, Harold arrived at school to find the hallways lined with handmade posters thanking him for his service, both military and custodial. Children had drawn pictures of him in uniform and with his mop bucket. Teachers had prepared presentations about the importance of service and sacrifice. When Harold walked into the gymnasium for what he thought was a routine assembly, he found hundreds of students, teachers, parents, and community members on their feet, applauding. A huge banner stretched across the front of the room. "Thank you, Harold Peterson, American hero." Principal Martinez took the microphone. "Today we honor a man who has served our country and our school with quiet dignity and unwavering dedication. Harold Peterson reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes or seek recognition. Sometimes they carry mop buckets and show up early every day to make the world a little bit better for children." Harold was invited to the front of the gymnasium, where a group of local veterans presented him with a flag that had flown over the U.S. Capitol in his honor. The mayor proclaimed it Harold Peterson Day in the city. But the moment that brought tears to Harold's eyes was when little Maria Rodriguez presented him with a new bucket, bright blue and shiny, with Harold Peterson, American hero, professionally engraved on the side. That evening, as Harold cleaned the school with his new bucket, he reflected on the unexpected turn his life had taken. 3 days ago, he'd been discarded and forgotten. Today, he was celebrated and honored. But what mattered most to him wasn't the recognition or the ceremony. It was the knowledge that he could continue serving the children of Lincoln Elementary, continuing the mission of service that had defined his life since he first put on a Marine uniform 56 years earlier. The story of Harold Peterson teaches us that dignity and worth aren't determined by job titles or paychecks. Real value lies in how we serve others, how we show up each day with commitment and integrity, and how we treat the work we're given as sacred trust. Harold Peterson understood something that many people never learn. Every job done with excellence and care is a form of service to humanity. In a world that often measures success by wealth and status, Harold Peterson reminds us that true success is measured by the lives we touch and the positive difference we make in our communities. He shows us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized and unappreciated, doing essential work with quiet dignity. The children of Lincoln Elementary will remember Harold Peterson not just as the janitor who kept their school clean, but as the man who taught them that service comes in many forms and that every person deserves respect, regardless of their circumstances. They learned that the quiet man with the mop bucket was a war hero, but more importantly, they learned that he was an everyday hero long before anyone knew about his medals. Harold Peterson's story is a reminder that we should never underestimate the people around us or assume we know their full story. The person serving our food, cleaning our offices, or maintaining our buildings may have their own history of courage, sacrifice, and heroism. They deserve our respect and gratitude, not our indifference or condescension. This is why gratitude matters. This is why we must see the humanity in everyone we encounter. This is why the work people do in service to others, no matter how humble it may seem, deserves our appreciation and recognition. Harold Peterson's quiet dignity in the face of injustice reminds us that character is revealed not in moments of triumph, but in how we respond to adversity and how we treat others when no one is watching. Today, Harold Peterson continues to clean Lincoln Elementary with the same dedication he has shown for 6 years. His new bucket gleams in the hallway lights, and his name is engraved with honor instead of fading in anonymity. But ask Harold what changed, and he will tell you that he is still just doing his job, serving his community one clean floor at a time. Because for Harold Peterson, true service has never been about recognition. It has always been about showing up, doing the work, and making the world a little bit better for the people who come after him. The bucket may be new, but the man carrying it remains unchanged. Harold Peterson, United States Marine, American hero, and proof that dignity, honor, and quiet service will always triumph over indifference and ingratitude. His story continues every morning at 5:30, when the lights come on at Lincoln Elementary and the work begins again.